Welcome back to another exciting episode of TV Guys. I am Matt.
And I'm Brian.
And this is the way. We are talking about the number one reason that people owned a Disney Plus membership for the last year, and except for those who have really young kids and they want them to watch the same movies 90,000 times, like me.
Yeah, I actually just recently started getting into The Mandalorian, because if you go back to our first episode, you were talking about The Mandalorian, and I was like, I don't know, I haven't seen it.
and quickly Brian caught up with all 16 episodes.
Yep, I did, and then I caught up fast enough to spoil it on our last episode, even though I bleeped that out, giving myself more editing to do.
That's true. So speaking of spoilers, we are going to spoil everything up until the very final scene of Mandalorian Season 2 at the last episode. So everything's fair game. If you're not completely caught up, then go watch it, because there's some really awesome stuff that happens in Season 2. And if you're like, I've watched Season 1, I don't know about Season 2, it is worth it. I watched Season 1, I was like, this is a pretty good show. And then Season 2 just really took it to the next level.
For me, I would rank from like a 1 to 5, like 5 level being like my fandom for like the Muppets. Star Wars in general is like a 3.5 for me. It's not quite as high. And so until this year, I had never really seen any extra Star Wars content aside from the main Star Wars saga, the main 9 movies. Obviously, I'd seen those. And so everyone kept telling me that The Mandalorian was so good. And I was like, you know what? I like the movies. I've always been in the mindset of I'm going to get to some of this extra Star Wars content eventually. And I decided to jump in, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I'm probably just maybe a hair more of a Star Wars fan than you are, but still, like, I haven't seen the Clone Wars TV show like that, animated one, or even the Clone Wars movie. I saw the episode 2, Attack of the Clones. That's a different thing. So there's some Star Wars content that is considered canon that I haven't even watched myself. But overall, I have very positive feelings about Star Wars. And so let's jump back real quick. A couple years ago, 2018. So Jon Favreau he's the visionary behind The Mandalorian. And he's in pre-production for the movie The Lion King, which if we had to suffer through a pointless remake of The Lion King in order to get to where we are today with The Mandalorian and the future of the Star Wars saga, I guess it ends up being worth it. But he, in pre-production, is working on this idea with The Mandalorian. He has this idea, and he's like, okay, so he's spending a lot of his time working on the pre-production and getting things in line for Lion King, but then his extra time he's dedicating to, let me flesh out this idea, let me get some scripts together. And so he actually wasn't able to film or direct any of the first season because he was tied up with Lion King. But he came up with this at the time. And in fact, Brian and I, right before we were talking, we brought up Community. And Donald Glover is actually Donald Glover's idea in talking with Jon Favreau of keeping the big reveal of the first episode with Baby Yoda or the child or Grogu, whatever you want to call it, keeping that a secret. And so then Jon Favreau took it to heart and just he made sure no merchandising was out about it, no marketing. And I find that super impressive that this show was able to get the audience it got and get people intrigued without even saying what the show is about, because they had to hide it.
Yeah. Well, the Star Wars audience is there. Like, if you put Star Wars on something, someone's going to watch it. They might eventually come back and say it sucks, which luckily this didn't, but they're going to watch it first.
Yeah. And that's a huge deal too, because this is following on the heels of Star Wars Episode 9, and people were mad. They were mad at how Star Wars ended, and they had several bones to pick with the Star Wars universe. And so to say, okay, we've got this property that we can't let die because apparently these sequels killed a lot of goodwill. Like, how do we get this audience back and make sure we can continue to profit on them? And Jon Favreau was like, I've got this idea. So that Disney put all of their weight behind it of we have to make this show a success.
I didn't hate Episode 9. I think there's definitely some bad and some good to it, but honestly, like that scene with C-3PO and they have to reprogram him to be able to read the Sith is just super creepy and awesome. Like, I love that scene.
Yeah. I feel the same way. There's good and there's bad, and it's kind of like they landed the trilogy as well as they could for what happened with the previous movie. A lot of the problems with this movie, besides pacing, were because of this. There wasn't a clear direction for 7, 8, and 9 together.
Yeah, I agree with that. So if we're talking with The Mandalorian, first thing I kind of want to bring up, and this could be something that people know, and maybe I'm just dumb, so please feel free to correct me, but I'm trying to piece together the timeline of Grogu, or Baby Yoda. So
just be careful what you wish. Feel free to correct me. Oh, really? Gloves coming off.
So say he was born like 50 years ago, and he was at the Jedi Temple initially. So he was probably around during the prequels at the temple somewhere.
Okay.
And they say that he was moved, and so he was moved before Anakin came and killed all the children, which is a crazy sentence to say, but it, happened. Which, first of all, if someone knew to move him, why did they not move the rest of the children? And as far as who moved him, because they say that he's basically been like hidden away for so many years, I'm thinking it has to be a Jedi that did not survive Episode 3. That did not survive episodes like Order 66. Like, it could have been Mace Windu. Who knew? But I'm thinking, because otherwise, who would have been looking after him? It's basically kind of implied that he was abandoned. So my thought is, however they found out, one of the high-ranking Jedi, I don't think it would have been Obi-Wan or Yoda, because I think in the time between Episodes 3 and 4, they would have looked in on him.
Yeah.
So someone else moved him there, intending to go back and help him and train him, and then they died, presumably in Order 66. And then he was just left there until someone else found out about him. That's kind of the headcanon that I'm filling in the gaps on. What do you think of that?
My only guess would be if it possibly was Obi-Wan, because he was the only one on Tatooine that he was there for Luke to begin with. But I mean, he also didn't check in on Leia, and he didn't. He also died really quick. He died really quickly, considering the events of Episode 4 that just immediately got thrown in.
Yeah. Well, I would think they didn't check in on Leia because they trusted General Organa. Because at the end of Episode 3, when the three of them, Organa and Yoda and Obi-Wan, are all figuring out what to do, I think they figured, okay, this guy, we trust him. He's got Leia. She's fine. And yet they trusted Luke with Owen and Beru, but they weren't nearly as into the whole process. Like, I don't think that they would have really been able to protect him, as seen by what happens in Episode 4. So that's why Obi-Wan was looking after him.
Yeah, I think the biggest weirdness with this show is the life cycle of these things. I mean, they kind of have to have it be a longer child period because Yoda was so old, so I guess that's probably what they were going for.
Yeah.
But I felt like that was probably a little clumsy. I don't know.
Yeah.
So for those, I mean, there's a lot of you guys that you've watched these shows, and so you probably are aware. So speaking of timeline, this show takes place a couple years after the end of Episode 6. I think that's a great timeline to start because I think I've said in a previous episode that I really enjoy the world building that they're doing. The guy, so Werner Herzog is in this the first season, and he's in a couple different episodes. He's that like German accent, very thick Eastern European accent guy who's working with trying to get the child back, and he's something of, if you don't know much about him, he's a very unique filmmaker. Star Wars is not the type of movies that he watches or would want to be in. But somehow he was casted and brought into it. And he had said in interviews, he's like, I read through the world building of this and I really was impressed. This is just high class filmmaking, which is just crazy praise from a guy like Werner Herzog. And I really like that they're taking advantage of this time, because one of my big problems with the sequels was, what the heck is the First Order? Where did this First Order come from? So the rebellion became the Emperor, yet like they're in charge, but yet they're again a resistance that they're rebelling again. It's like you can't be a rebellion if you're the ones in control and in power.
Yeah.
And so there's a little bit of like that world building that was completely lost in the sequels. And it's starting to make more and more sense with these episodes where it's saying like, well, they can't police these outer rims. And so what the Empire did really well was they had kind of this constitution of planets where they can have a presence on all of these different planets, but they can also have people in charge that they're like, you have free reign over this planet. And of course that led to corruption because it's always going to, but they at least had order because they knew how to have a structure.
Yeah.
So
the structure is really good. I like the world building a lot. It really feels like you're in the Star Wars world. And you know what? If you have a lot of stuff to organize, why not use Squarespace? You know, there's a great website. You can do great designs by so we don't have a website, but if we did, we would use Squarespace. I'm thinking we'll sound more like a legit podcast if we start doing these things.
I think we actually have to say that is not a legitimate advertisement because I think there's some sort of stipulations about how we do these things. I was gonna be like, did you get approached by an ad guy without my knowledge?
Not yet.
Not yet. But hey, Squarespace, that is exactly what a commercial would sound like if you wanted to call us.
But
now I'm just completely thrown off. What the heck are we talking about?
But with the world building, what I like about it is there's so much within. It can feel like you're in the Star Wars world without having to have all the main guys. We don't have to meet up with Leia and Han Solo and Chewbacca and all them, which is kind of refreshing that it could be its own thing. Because I don't really like it. I think I mentioned this before. When you bring in someone for fan service without them needing to be there. So, they bring in Boba Fett and a few other people, but it seems natural. Like, they fit into the story. There's a reason for them to be there. They're not just bringing in Boba Fett just because of bringing in Boba Fett.
Yeah, I was absolutely gonna join in on that. Is that the fan service of the second season is absolutely just legitimate. I think you said it. Natural. There you go. Natural is a good way to phrase that. The fan service is completely natural, and it doesn't feel shoehorned. And like even in the first season, the only little bit of fan service we got was the Jawa's sandcrawler. And then probably the fact that Baby Yoda looks like Yoda and is the only other member of that species we've ever seen.
Well, was it the first season or the second season that they went to the same bar they went to in A New Hope?
It might have been the first season. No, I think it was the same. Oh, yeah, and then there was that other fan service, too, of, like, those little creatures that Jabba the Hutt had, like, having them in cages. I remember that, yeah. The other thing I was going to say about this show is one of the great things that it's doing, too, is it's laying a framework for a bigger universe, which, I mean, if you need a guy to do that, that's Jon Favreau. He's already done this with Marvel Cinematic Universe, and he has great relationship with Disney. And that's one of the things that I like, too, is that he's utilizing this relationship he has with Disney, and he's bringing in other directors that have a relationship with Disney, but that also, like, are part of this this network of people that it's, you know, one of the complaints about Star Wars has always been like these white guys are the ones coming in and directing and they're calling the shots. Well, we've got episodes directed by women, episodes directed by black men, episodes directed by other people of color. We've got the main cast member is a Hispanic man. And so it's really great to see them being able to tap into this established network that is already being developed with diversity and to be able to say, like, look at this Star Wars universe. This Star Wars universe isn't just a bunch of white guys running around because, I mean, you look at the original 3 movies, name a woman that's in the movie besides Leia. Like, it's a bunch of white guys. That's all it is.
There's Luke's aunt who dies right away.
Yeah. There's that one lady who's in charge of, like, the rebellion and giving them, like, orders at a certain point, but you see her for, like, 2 scenes, and that's it.
Speaking of diversity, I mean, I'm going to just take a quick tangent outside of The Mandalorian, come right back. So I caught up on the latest episode of This Is Us, and you know what I realized? Randall has his white dad, his black dad, his mom remarried, so he has a Hispanic stepdad, and now we find out that his biological mom had a Vietnamese boyfriend, so he's got white, black, Hispanic, and Asian dads.
He'll be okay, you know? He's got good representation in his family line.
Yeah. So jumping back into The Mandalorian with that, you really get that, especially Cara Dune, I think, is a great female character. And kind of like what Leia could have been. Because, Leia was a good character, but they didn't really let her do a whole lot.
Yeah.
And same thing with even Padme in the sequels or prequels. She had a few moments that were really good, but for the most part, she was there because, well, someone has to be Luke and Leia's mom. She has to be there. I don't have to give her interesting stories, I guess.
Yeah, her biggest stuff was like at the end of episode 2. when they're in that giant little pit and being attacked by those creatures, and
Yeah.
then she's able to like ride one of them with Hayden Christensen.
Yeah, that was awesome. Have you ever seen, it's a video of like an award show or something, and Carrie Fisher is calling out George Lucas, and she's saying like, that lady Padme, whatever, who's supposed to be my mother, she gets a new pair of clothes every time she walks on screen, and you didn't even let me wear underwear in the original Star Wars.
I was going to actually bring that up because George Lucas, the reasoning he gave to Carrie Fisher, and apparently it worked for why she shouldn't wear underwear, was because in space there's no underwear. That's what he told her. And
Yeah.
she was like, oh, okay. Or she probably fought it, but she ended up going with it because whatever, what are you going to do?
Exactly.
It's the 70s.
So I also don't know where they're going to go with The Mandalorian in season 3, because so much of this show is hinged on, I'm just going to call him The Mandalorian. I know his name is Din Djarin.
You know what? I'm going to go with The Mandalorian too.
Yeah. Din something. So much of it is about The Mandalorian and Grogu. I know that one. Like being together. Like he's a changed person. Like he's not just a bounty hunter. He like truly gets a connection and cares about Grogu. Like they have kind of a father-son relationship, and he's willing to do anything for Grogu. And he's going through all these missions are basically just, I know someone who knows a Jedi. So, but you need to do this mission for me first, and then I'll give you information. That's kind of the track they're on, because he realizes that Grogu is a Jedi, and his rightful place is to be with the Jedi. But then now that he's gone out with Luke to become a Jedi, and they're separated, where do you go? I get that he's kind of a changed man. He's not the same guy he was in the pilot, but it's interesting to see where he's going to go without having Grogu there. And I don't think they're going to keep up with Luke, because obviously he's supposed to be like 40 years younger than Mark Hamill, and the camera tricks they used worked for like a little scene of young Luke, but I don't think they could have him be like a regular character on the show that much. So I don't know how much Grogu is going to be able to be on it. But then again, why would you cut out one of the most popular characters of your show? So there's a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah, I could see it being like a Grogu doesn't respond to Luke's training and comes back to Mandalorian sort of story arc. Because I think that there's a really, really good arc of season 1 and 2 of Mandalorian's character development, of seeing him be more and more stepping into the dad role and stepping into like, because it's a really intriguing idea, and props to Jon Favreau, because this is the heart of it, is it's this unwilling father sort of thing, or reluctant father, I guess.
Yeah.
But that he steps into the responsibility because he's a man of honor, and stepping into that responsibility despite never asking for it, but just because you are the one that's there. Like that's a really awesome arc to watch. And it's a slow burn through those episodes, through both of the seasons. And like how you said, it kind of, The Mandalorian, let's be honest, it follows a formula. Every single episode is, here's a fetch quest. Yeah, and then you can come back to the main thing after it really moves at a very slow pace, but that's the exact sort of way that a Western is that it's like every single episode kind of stands on its own. And so every single thing is meeting these new people, helping them to solve their problems, and then being able to move on to a new town.
Yeah.
And so you get to see, so the first episode of season 2 really does well with the Western roots of really showcasing that. And then there's that one episode with what's her name? The Jedi, I'm blanking on it.
Ahsoka Tano?
Ahsoka Tano, thank you. Yeah, with her, where you can really feel the Kurosawa roots of the samurai.
Yeah.
Because samurais really influenced the Western type movies. And so you got to see both of those really highlighted this season, and I thought that was great.
Yeah. And some of those extra little missions just make for really fun moments. Like when they're transporting the frog lady and Grogu keeps eating the eggs, which he wouldn't have to do if they had HelloFresh.
Gosh, come right to your door. Contactless delivery. One of my favorite, real quick sidebar for the funniest moment of the season, and I think for Angie too, actually probably of the series so far, was one of the soft openings when he's trying to get Grogu to fix something in like one of the wiring, and he's trying to talk him through fixing it, and then it's so relatable of trying to get someone who's not really understanding what you're saying to do something that's a little more technical.
Yeah.
And so he's just like, no, don't touch no, don't touch that. You'll get shocked. Don't touch that. And then, of course, it leads to he gets shocked. And then Mandalorian just holds his head in shame. That soft opening was hilarious.
That reminded me a lot of Rocket and Groot in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. He's like, this
Yep.
button, no, not this button. It'll kill us all. I was like, huh?
No, that's the exact button I just said not to push. Does anyone have any tape? Would duct tape work? Yes, duct tape would work. Then why did you say that you had asked if duct tape would work if you don't have duct tape?
Yeah. And it's also interesting with, and we mentioned earlier, the whole Boba Fett of it all. Because, I don't know, maybe this is an obvious answer. In Star Wars in general, all the movies and shows put together, is Boba Fett a villain?
In the Star Wars in episode 5 and 6, he is. You don't get... So the thing about Boba Fett, which people love, was he had so little screen time in season 5, but he was super imposing. In episode 5.
Yeah.
And so he's there in Empire, and he's so imposing, and you get this feeling like he's the best guy that there is. He's the top bounty hunter that's ever existed, to the point that even he can stand up to Darth Vader. Like, no one was standing up to Darth Vader except for this guy, and Darth Vader would listen to him. Not like Darth Vader submitted to him, but he wouldn't challenge Boba Fett. So he has this mythos that in episode 5, and everyone's like, okay, I'm excited to see this guy in episode 6, and he goes out like a little pansy right away as he gets knocked with a little club by a blind Han Solo, and falls into a sarlacc. And so everyone was pretty upset about that, and like, we need to see episode 5 Boba get brought to justice, or justice for episode 5 Boba.
Yeah.
So this is 30 years of fan wishing, finally, 40 years actually.
And a lot about, we mentioned earlier, episode 2 in the prequels, which I think is the weakest of all the movies. But I did like the little tidbit of seeing Boba Fett's dad and seeing like little Boba Fett and seeing like his origins. Yeah. But it's like, he was a menace because we were following Han Solo as the hero. But Han Solo himself probably did some stuff like Boba Fett before. And it's just whoever we're supposed to follow is the hero, and someone else is the villain. It's not as simple as good and bad. Like, it's not like Rita Repulsa on the moon. I'm going to destroy the world.
Yeah. You've of course you brought in Rita. Why are you bringing Rita back into this? With Boba Fett, he's definitely a lot of a blank slate, and so to be able to say, well, we can bring him in as an anti-hero, it really worked. He was a guy that you would root for, and you can be rooting for him because he's a man of principle. And so if the wrong person offers him money, he still sticks to that principle, and you don't want to be on his bad side. But he was on the right side for this episode.
And I didn't realize until earlier today that there was a post-credit scene about Boba Fett taking over Jabba's palace.
Yeah, I didn't realize that at the time of watching it, because I mean that's one of the negatives of Disney Plus, is then it like goes into, okay, here's what you should watch next while the credits are rolling, and you don't get to the very end of it.
And it's not like it's not like Marvel where there's always going to be an end credit scene. So if you don't know to look for it, I don't always fast forward through all the credits just to check. Maybe I should do that a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with Disney properties. I know that it's funny. A weird Disney property that had post-credit scenes is all the Pirates movies. All Pirates movies had post-credit scenes. Even the first one.
Well, that was the monkey going grab. That one made sense because then that's why in the second one they talk about the undead monkey.
Yeah, and you even see the undead monkey.
Yeah, I never actually saw episode or the 4th and 5th ones after the original trilogy of Pirates. I didn't see the other ones.
Yeah, you're not missing much. Some people might fight me about that, but no, you're not missing much.
I'm trying to think what else we have to say about.
Oh, final thing I'm going to bring up, just because I know some people like it. So I know that we've got some people who play Fortnite, and right now the Fortnite season is in the middle of a bounty hunter Mandalorian season. That he's a playable character. He's a boss that you can fight in there. You can have his gun and his jetpack. But one thing I didn't realize is I think so Fortnite is like really good at developing business relationships, because they've had DC characters, they've had Marvel characters, they've had Star Wars characters, they have John Wick, they're going to have Predator coming right like this week. They're introducing Predator into Fortnite, and they're doing like this shared connected universe with all of these properties that are not owned by the same companies. And they're able to make this happen. But one thing that they did was that ILM, Industrial Lights and Magic, when they were setting up the sets, because what they do for Mandalorian for sets is they surround them in screens. They have these giant screens, and they're able to render their backgrounds in real time. And then they bring some different stuff on stage. Like they'll be able to bring in like his cockpit. And so you'll have him sit in the cockpit and you see the actual copy of the cockpit, and then around him is all the screens. And some of these screens are able to keep up in real time to the point that they don't need to really add much additional effects once it's done. Like that's where the technology is, which makes sense that Jon Favreau is behind this, because Jon Favreau was all about let's better and better technology for filming. And so I didn't realize ILM, when they were first booked to create those scenes and to create those backgrounds, they went and got help from Epic Games, who puts out Fortnite. So they had already had this relationship, and so that when the Marvel season was done, the next logical step was let's bring in a Mandalorian season. I always felt that I was like, this is such a weird next step. A Mandalorian season? What the heck? But it makes more sense when I look at that now.
That's cool.
Seeing that. Yeah.
So I just realized one big omission. I don't think we can stop talking about the Mandalorian before we talk about Giancarlo Esposito.
Yeah, I had thought about him too. Oh my gosh, what a great actor.
What a great villain.
Yeah.
Do you know what my first exposure to him was?
I don't. Mine was Breaking Bad, but yours is probably different.
No, mine was when he was Pierce's brother Gilbert on Community.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Breaking Bad, and this, he kind of plays the same thing. Like he's so like calm. He's not always calm in Mandalorian, but he's so like that calm. He's not going to have to shout, but he's still so menacing and creepy. Like he means business.
Yeah, it's a really impressive form of acting to communicate so much while being so reserved, appearing so reserved. And so when his big moments of like actual emotion and showcasing big emotions comes out, it feels so unnatural, because this guy is like, he's always in control. And this villain, as well as the villain from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, that's always what he is he's like 99% of the time he is always composed and in control. And if he's not, then you got to watch out. And so Giancarlo Esposito is such a tremendous actor to be able to portray that in the way he does.
Exactly.
I hope to see more of him, because I mean, whenever he's in anything, I'm always like, I'm more excited about this because he's in it. I remember like being super giddy when he popped up in episode 6 or 7 or so last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, too. He's always like, oh man, he's in this. This is like I already thought it was good, but it just bumped it up to another level.
Exactly. And this season had some really good actors that popped up, including him, of course, and then getting Carl Weathers back for a couple episodes. Bill Burr.
I was just gonna say Bill Burr is great. He's funny. Another Breaking Bad actor.
Yeah, yeah. And there was a scene that so the first episode that had Bill Burr in it, that was a really, really good episode. But Bill Burr's character had like nothing redeeming about him.
Yeah.
But however, in the second season, he had like a redemption episode, and that episode was really, really good. And in fact, Bill Burr had some tremendous acting when they're sitting down with that other Imperial guy.
Oh yeah.
And Bill Burr's like he has this slow burn of like his rage is starting to come out, but he's keeping like this appearance up of like, well, yeah, you remember this, because if you guys don't remember that episode, this leader that he bumps into, Imperial leader, he cost the lives of all these men, and the Imperial leader got away because these men sacrificed their lives pretty much so that he didn't have to.
Yeah.
And so Bill Burr was there like speaking for those guys and trying to act, because they had snuck in and they didn't want to arouse suspicion. So he's still trying to act like he's just, another mindless worker for him. But he starts calling him out on that exact battle and the calls he made, and eventually ends with him killing him.
You can tell right away he's not going to be able to hold this together.
Yeah. Just great. That was a great scene.
He kind of reminds me a little bit of Woody Harrelson's character in Solo.
Yeah.
That same kind of feel.
Yep. Speaking of Solo, Jon Favreau was in that. I mean, Jon Favreau, I found out he voiced a stormtrooper in animated series of Clone Wars, and that he, of course, I did know this, voiced that pilot character CGI one from Solo. So I mean, he's had this love for Star Wars, and this is what I love about Jon Favreau, was when he loves something, you can tell, and he puts so much heart into it. He put so much heart into Elf, which is why it's a classic. He put so much heart into the movie Chef, which is why so many people love that movie, and of course into Iron Man and the MCU, and now this as well.
Speaking of health, I keep going on these tangents a little bit. I saw a little clip of Jack Black, and someone asked him what's his favorite holiday movie, and he said Elf. It's like, yeah, Jon Favreau and Will Ferrell, they knocked out of the park, and they're like, man, it's a lot of it shows a lot of humility to not pick your own movie. He's like, wait, I was in a holiday movie? Oh yeah, The Holiday. I mean, that's the great one.
I like that. The Holiday wasn't a bad movie. I'll say that.
So, do you have anything else to say before we jump into trivia?
I don't. I do not have anything else to say. I completely forgot. What was our trivia question last week? Do you remember it?
Yeah, I remember it because you started to think we were talking about a different show completely. It was about Cheers. And I was talking about a character on Cheers who was named Coach.
That's
and then
right.
you started to think we're talking about the show Coach. So
that's because I'm stupid, Brian. Thank you.
Okay, so the first 3 seasons of Cheers, there was a character named Coach, played by the actor Nicholas Colasanto, and then the actor passed away, so he wasn't on the rest of the series, obviously. And then in the final episode, I asked, what did they do to pay homage to the actor who played Coach? And the answer is, in his dressing room, when he was on the show, he had this picture. I think it was like this picture of this like Native American guy. It was like his favorite poster picture kind of thing. So after he died, they moved it out of his dressing room. They hung it up on the wall of the Cheers set. So in later seasons, you can see it on the wall as one of the background things in the bar. And then in the final episode, Ted Danson as Sam Malone, he's in the bar alone with the lights off. You see him tell a customer through the door, sorry, we're closed. And he goes to the back room. But before he goes, he stops at the picture that was in Coach's dressing room and he adjusts it, he straightens it. And then he goes into the back room. That was just one little subtle nod saying, hey, we miss Coach in the final season.
That's sweet. I think I actually had heard that before. Even though I've never watched an episode of Cheers, I think I had heard of that, about the character that wasn't around. All right. So this week's trivia question is something you may not know or probably would have guessed but have never heard, is that Pedro Pascal, who plays the Mandalorian, he shares acting in the suit with a number of different stuntmen. And so because you don't need to see his face, he doesn't have to always be the one in the suit. In fact, there is one episode of The Mandalorian when he never even dons the suit. He just provides the voiceover. So any footage you see on screen, it is not Pedro Pascal in that costume. So which episode was it that he never actually appears on screen?
So I don't know the answer to this, so I can't give it up. But is that any specific reason? Like, was he not available, or is it just so many stunts that they didn't really need him, or do you know what the reason was?
You know, I might look into that because I see the trivia here because I was looking up some stuff about Mandalorian to talk about it, and this just really caught my eye. But it doesn't really tell me why. So I'll take a look, and maybe I'll have a better answer for that next week.
All right, sounds good. Speaking of next week, we don't know what we're doing yet, so we can't really tease it. But we will come back next week with another episode about something.
About beep. Well, until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.